Welcome to Marshall Knows Stuff. I'm Marshall and I know stuff. Stick around and I'll show you how to know some of the stuff that I know. So remember that little piece of steel that on my etching video I was experimenting with that acrylic pin on? Wanted to see if it was going to block the etching or not. Little piece of steel, and like I said in the video before, it's 1080 steel, so it's actually a really good steel. But a little bit too small to do anything with. Or is it? Not for Marshall. This is actually a perfect size to make one of those little tactical utility knives they see all over the place. I know SOG makes one, and I started to sketch on the back side of it, just playing around with some designs. I want to make a finger hole in it and curve the blade over on either side, but I'm not going to go with this one. I actually want to center the pointer hole right there. I think it's going to make it a little bit more sturdy aesthetically and a little bit sturdier in the hand. So I'm going to start sketching a little bit more on this. I'm going to erase this off. I'm going to start sketching on it, and I'm going to turn this into a little cool tactical utility knife. What would you call one of those anyway? Like tactility? A Marshall tactical utility knife. Maybe marshalltactical utility knife. This episode of Marshall Knows Stuff, we're going to make a marshalltactical utility knife. Like I said, I want to center that finger hole first off. That's going to be my starting point for this whole project. So, once again, I'm going to pull out my micrometer. It doesn't need to be a micrometer to do this. I'm just using this because it's a quick, easy thing for me. It's handy. You could use any other measuring device and then split that in half. I've got my micrometer handy, so I'm going to be using that. And grab a handy dandy Sharpie. Rest it on my edge, make myself a mark. I'm going to go to the other side and compare right down the middle. So we've got our middle point. I'm going to set my circle at that middle point, and then we're going to draw the rest of it around that. And while I was at it, I also measured from the top to bottom and gave myself a lateral reference point, so that I can hit that exactly in the middle of that too. So this circle right here, I'm not going to do anything with. I'm actually going to put the circle around this one, and then that will give me my exact center of this whole piece of steel, and then I'll start building it around that. All right, I also drew a pointer finger size hole around my mark, and I decided that I want my bolster to be no further than past my pointer finger, so I'm going to give myself that little mark there. That's where the blade is going to end. So all that is going to be a curved blade through there, and I'm going to keep my bolster to about right there. That's my mark for my blade. I'm done with that side. Now I need to figure out what I'm going to do on this side. So I didn't like where my marks were before on this. I'm going to erase some of those off and redraw where I want the edge of all this to be. I used Sharpie to get it, and just a real quick tip. To get Sharpie out, you can use acetone. Lighter fluid. You can use lighter fluid, and it'll take Sharpie right out. So I'm using a Q-tip with a little bit of lighter fluid on it, and I'm going to erase all this crud that was in there before, so I know exactly what I'm looking at. And those are my marks. There we go. Like I always say, come up with a specific idea and then work towards that. So I know that I want my pointer finger to fit through this, which means my middle finger will have to be somewhere in there. So I took about the same width between the center pointer hole and the outside, and I drew this, and then I started to curve it along so that my middle finger would fit over that area there. And then I also don't want a corner digging into the palm of my hand, so I'm going to go ahead and smooth out and mark over that right there. I know that I'm going to need to take that out. Also, I don't want that corner in there because that will also be in the palm of my hand, so I'm going to go ahead and mark that out. And I want the other side of the knife to roughly be the same shape as that, so I'm going to cut across there as the other side of my knife. Now that will be the edge there, and I want a little bit more point than that, so even though those two look about the same, I'm going to curve this one in a little bit more to give it a little bit more of a point and make the tip of the knife make a little bit more sense. Now, Would I want the other side to match that? Probably not. I like that little handle being where it is, so I could pull this down a little bit more and make it match, but I think it'll be a little bit too pointy on that side. I like that where it is. It's a little bit asymmetrical, but I think it'll work out pretty well for the overall shape and feel of the knife. Okay, I'm going to start by piloting this this finger hole, the pointer finger hole. Keep whatever you're drilling lubed because you don't want to burn your bits. Yep, right on my mark. So I'm going to keep on with it. Still going right down the middle. If you're not right down the middle, you want to get that done before you punch your hole all the way through. Once you punch the hole all the way through, then you're going to have to ream it out if you're off center, and that's a way bigger problem than you want to deal with. So before you punch it all the way through, make sure you're right where you want to be. Right down the middle. Now that I've got it piloted out, I'm going to move over to my step bit because that's going to be thick enough to get a finger hole through. I'm going to start with my 3/4 step bit. Made it all the way through with a 3/4. Put that one back. And gonna move on to my 1 1/8 inch. Flip it over and do the other side. I'm drilling it out to about 7/8 and it tapers, so the 3/16 piece of steel is a little bit thicker than these rings are, so I have to hit it from both sides to make sure that it's uniform all the way through. And there we go. Our hole's punched through. We're getting there. Angle grinder time. Done with the general shape, and now that I'm looking at it, it does look like this side is lopsided because I didn't decide to use the same angle on both sides. So I think I'll take a little bit more off of that, and once I do that, then I think I'll put this on the jig and then give it an edge on the one side. Like I always do whenever I put the bevel onto a blade, I'm marking this with a bright paint pen And then I'm going to scratch it right down the middle so I can tell where my middle point is going to be on that bevel, on the edge. Once I have that middle point on there, then whenever I've got it on the jig and I'm moving it back and forth on the belt sander, I can tell when I hit the middle, and then I know when to stop. All right, now I've got it clamped on the jig, and what I did is I gave myself a reference point of the top of the jig like usual. So I'm just going to make sure that it's parallel with the top of the jig, and then that way I know that I've got the same angle on both sides. Okay, I've got my bevel on both sides, and I had to cut into this little finger ring a little bit because the steel was so thick that I was bottoming out on this crappy belt sander. So what I'm going to do now is on all my jigs I make these adjustable so I can back them out. I'm going to back this out, and I'm going to put the second bevel on it. It'll be an even steeper angle so that I can just close that little bit of a gap that's left over, and then that will be my edge. So I cleaned up all the flat sides on the Marshall Tacticalultiliknife, and I'm deciding that I don't really like that bevel. I want that bevel to be nice and straight, and I want it to look like a freaking robot did that. I want it to be exactly straight. I don't want it to be a double, and I don't like the way that that's turning out. So I think I'm going to put down the Marshall Tacticalultiliknife for tonight. It's starting to get late, and I've got work in the morning, so I'm going to put this guy down, and I'm just going to make this one a part one because I want this thing to come out slick. So I'm going to put it down for as long as it takes me to get a clean bevel on that. If I come up with some sort of way to get a jig on grinder or something else, then I might do that because it's just too thick. It's too thick to bring that together the way that I want. It's not clean, and both of those bevels have angles on it, so I would rather this thing end up perfect out of this little piece of steel than to do this half butt, half A55 and not be something cool that I would want to keep in my own pocket. So this one I'm still hopeful about. I think this will still be a cool project, but that will conclude the Marshall Tacticalultiliknife Part 1.